his name is prominent historically in the country for being linked to the cocaine trade. In Jai, the guy clearly linked historically to the cocaine trade, the chief of staff of the Guinea-Bissau military has never seen the inside of a prison cell. So there's so much more to say. It's just a kind of amazing story. Drugs put in safes, seized by military officials, planes landing. I mean, it is quite a story. It doesn't mean that it hasn't happened elsewhere, but I just think given the weakness of the state institutions, the degree to which the military have been in control, gives Guinea-Bissau a particular flavor.
How can I help? How can I be useful in ending needless suffering? Do not be afraid of work that has no end.
We have to organize a social movement.
We have an opportunity to lead by example versus just talking, hot air. I think the more people in this fight, the more we grow. Eventually it could change. You know, the people are the ones that can make the change.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Change Agents, an Ironclad original, proudly presented by Montana Knife Company. Today we're going to be talking with Mark Shaw. He is the director of the Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime. And we're going to be talking about the country of Guinea-Bissau, which is a country that the UN has designated one of the world's first narco states. Guinea-Bissau gained their independence in 1974, and since then, there have been at least 10 coup attempts, 2 within the last 4 years. It is one of the main entry points for cocaine to Europe, even though it is on the western coast of Africa. Prior to Mark's current role, he worked for 10 years at the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, and that included extensive field work in places like Guinea-Bissau. Let's get into it. Today's episode of Change Agents is brought to you by Onyx Off-Road. Now, some of you may have heard the term Onyx before in regards to hunting. Same company, different app, different utilization. This is specifically Onyx Off-Road. And if you like getting off the beaten path, if you like exploring where others may not like to go, then you are going to love Onyx Off-Road. It's the ultimate GPS navigation app for adventurers. When I turn this thing on, where I live up here in Kalispell, it lights up with available trail options that, quite frankly, I never would be able to, probably because I don't have the time to find and explore on my own. So with Onyx Off-Road, you can find open trails that are near you, even without cell service. And unlike Google, Onyx has real humans mapping the trails, providing detailed information on trail difficulty, descriptions, pictures, and more. So whether you're looking for rock crawling areas or checking if your trailer could make it to a dispersed camping location, Onyx Off-Road has you covered. Plus, you can explore both public lands and private properties confidentially, meaning you can look at them through the app. You can start your adventure with a 7-day free trial and experience the difference yourself. Download Onyx Off-Road today and elevate your off-roading experience. Is there anywhere on the globe that is not touched by organized crime?
I think the answer to that is no. Some places obviously look better. We have a global organized crime index, but generally the process of globalization, let's say the last 30 years, has meant an expansion of the reach of criminal markets, but also an expansion of their diversity. So just the sheer number of criminal markets that are present and the intersection between them. But what's very common in the debate is that the debate goes up and down the policy, if you like, priority list. When there's a big cocaine seizure or so many people die in the Mediterranean, people are, we need to confront illicit markets, and then it goes down the policy priority list. But it's a kind of dripping tap style problem, if you like, that isn't easily repaired and is very, very challenging. And the idea of the global initiative is to say, look, we need much more innovative solutions, more strategic response to organized crime, and we need to understand it better. We need to understand incentives better. We need to understand who's involved, etc. So, to answer your question, I think it's an enormous challenge, which which globally we're not getting to grips with, at least according to our index readings per country.
I would imagine it's a mixed bag. I know we're going to talk about Guinea-Bissau and
Sure.
Africa itself. You know, it seems as if there's localized organized crime. Maybe a good example is just the south of the U.S. border in Mexico. You know, there's cartels, and there's some discussion or argument, I think would probably be the best word, between, are they independently run or are they run and funded by nation states? You know, we're talking about fentanyl coming into the U.S., precursor chemicals coming from China. As you guys are looking at organized crime, I would imagine that you're finding localized issues or people being run at a local level. But how often, when you go upstream, are you finding that it is leading directly back to a nation state actor?
It depends what you. The answer to that is almost always. But it depends what you mean by a nation state actor. We've done 2 sweeps of the Global Organized Crime Index, which seeks to identify a number of types of criminal actors. And we label actors within states, so they are state-embedded actors. That can be, as when we talk about Guinea-Bissau, this is a classic case, but that can be, the customs official up to the president. Mm-hmm. And it's astonishing. That's the biggest set of criminal actors globally. And I think the conclusion that we have drawn is, threefold. Firstly, that's a kind of elephant in the room, in the way that we talk about organized crime as something separate from governments, good guys and bad guys. In fact, there's a lot of interface between them. 2, states themselves are vectors in the global criminal economy. They protect criminal actors for a variety of reasons. And I don't want to say all states, but state actors are drawn into the criminal economy because it's in the interest of criminal actors to get protection. The interest is not necessarily to overthrow states. The interest is to make money under the umbrella of political or institutional protection. And then I think thirdly, organized crime and geopolitics have always been a feature, but in a sort of emerging geopolitical conflict, those connections become more useful, whether it's the Iranian state using organized crime to threaten or take on or kill dissidents, or whether it's illicit markets being channeled in particular ways. These are tools that can be used in a wider set of conflicts. The reality is that some of those are very difficult to respond to, particularly, we haven't got to Guinea-Bissau, when, if you like, a state becomes hooked, in Guinea-Bissau's case on cocaine, it's very difficult to eradicate because people have interests in maintaining that, they're making money, it begins to shape the political economy around them, it's sort of par for the course in this debate to compare it to a cancer, but it's not a bad metaphor, if you like, and it's been very difficult to eradicate. Guinea-Bissau really shows that, I have to say.
Do you remember when you first started hearing about Guinea-Bissau?
Yeah, very well, because I was in the UN, and I went there on mission when a plane with cocaine had been seized. One had also flown in with fake Red Cross marks, as I recall, into Sierra Leone, close next door. So I would say in the mid, I can't remember the exact dates, but in the mid 2000s, and this is when the cocaine trade was really picking up along the West African coast, and it was very much in the news, and it was very visible. And in Guinea-Bissau in those days, Latin American, Colombian, Venezuelan folk were present. You could see them; they were in the hotels. So that's I guess that's when I first went to the country.
Can you describe the country itself? And I first heard, to be honest, Guinea-Bissau is not a country that most people have probably heard of in their everyday life. We were doing an episode. I was talking with a journalist named Sean Williams, who focused on Asian meth cartels. He specifically said hearing from somebody who has reported on or worked in Guinea-Bissau would be fascinating based off of their reputation with drug trafficking, of being labeled, whether you agree with it or not, as a narco state. But it seems like the country has a very unique history and political environment. If you could just unpack that for the listeners a little bit.
It does, and it's a fascinating place filled with extremely nice people, I have to say. And
ladies and gentlemen, this episode of Change Agents is brought to you by Montana Knife Company. If you are a fan of the show, if you've tuned in before, you've probably heard me talking about them. They are an American-made brand. Actually, just down the road from where I'm at right now, about 120 miles away, down in Frenchtown, is a man named Josh Smith, the founder of Montana Knives. And if you're a hunter, you've definitely heard about him. My favorite, my go-to, actually in my pack somewhere in this room, is the Mini Speed Goat. You're probably aware that they have a culinary line. They have a line that you could use for skinning, for fillet, and every use in the backcountry. But what you don't know is that on July 11th, they're going to have a tactical line. The first line, or the first knife in that line, is going to be called the War Goat. I wish I had one to show you, but that's how far into production they are right now. I don't even have one to hold up for you to see. When I do, you're definitely going to see it. And if it's anything like the other knives that Josh and Montana Knife Company make, you can be guaranteed it's going to serve every purpose that they claim it will. Go to MontanaKnifeCompany.com to check out what they have to offer. Good luck getting one of these things when they come available, because, man, they go fast. So be prepared and be on the lookout.
first point is to emphasize is that Guinea-Bissau fought a kind of, it had Amilcar Cabral, which was an iconic liberation leader in the African context, brought together a liberation war against Portugal for over a decade, which was brutal and tough, and he was a great intellectual and widely respected. In essence, the Carnation Revolution was connected, Portugal's, the fall of authoritarian rule in Portugal, and Guinea-Bissau achieved its independence in 1974. Cabral was killed in 73, and in a sense, this assassination was the forerunner of much that would come, because I think from the history of Guinea-Bissau, sort of killings within the political elite mark the history from this point. And his brother took over, and this was followed by a series of military coups, the entry into Guinea-Bissau in the early 2000s, early mid-2000s, the period when I sort of washed up on the shores of cocaine. And it's a country with, it's not big, it's 2.2 million, so tiny, actually. It's sort of wedged between Senegal, Guinea, Mali, and it's just had its history of independence is one of chronic instability. Assassinations amongst the elite, cycles of conflict. What defines the politics is, and until relatively recently, and actually we're entering an important period now, but until relatively recently, the conflict was confined to a political elite in Bissau who relied often on external sources of funding. The main crop of Guinea-Bissau, which interestingly keeps, it does enough. I mean, there's quite high levels of malnutrition comparatively in the 20 or higher percent, but there's a cashew crop. So the country is incredibly dependent on the price of cashew nuts. And the elite in Bissau relies on external flows, and you can see how cocaine and a number of other illicit markets, timber, migrants at one point, fits into this. And control around those flows generates resources which keeps you in power and allows you to feed your patronage network. The reason I mention the war is because the military, more like a militia, if you like, plays an absolutely key role. It has a lot of legitimacy, understandably, after the war, but becomes key to maintaining power. And for a sort of civilian elite, if you like, when you see the spate of coups in West Africa, Guinea-Bissau is really a little bit different to what's happening in Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, etc. It's got this longer history of recurring coups, sort of 4 or 5 and a dozen attempts, although we should discuss exactly what an attempted coup is. But what is this? This is networks within the civilian elite combining with elements within the military to seize power, so that they can, or attempt to seize power for a variety of reasons, so that they can access state resources. A couple of things have happened now. The PAIGC, the main liberation party, has splintered over the years. It is still present, but there's not a great ideological difference between the different parties that compete, and the elite know each other. And it's much more about greed and power and positioning, I think, to be really very frank. The key development now is an authoritarian tendency by the current President Siseko Embalo, and to some degree the conflict is breaking out of its standard elite boundaries, if I could say it like that, Andy. And it is, for example, civil society, independent media, people standing up are being targeted, and the events, you know, around, you know, it's what is being labeled as attempted coups are key to this consolidation of control. This very fragile balance historically between the president and the elected National Assembly, the lack of clarity on powers between the president and the prime minister, have all fed into this very unstable political arrangement, in which cocaine has always been a feature from the early 2000s. And one point to describe it is that in this elite, people benefit more from the conflict and the turnover of control than they do from achieving a degree of stability. So in a sense, the elite's not completely portioned off from the population, but the population, if you travel around Guinea-Bissau, is working hard, trying to make ends meet, not per se involved in the cocaine economy, although money flows down into members of the military and the like. But the conflict is really around power within this political elite.
How did the current president rise to power? I was looking at my show notes. Says that there's been 10 attempted coups since 1974, which is about once every 4 to 5 years, with only one democratically elected president actually completing a full term in office.
He was democratically elected, but I say that I suppose with air inverted commas, in that the election was challenged, and he essentially forged forward without I think there was a Supreme Court ruling, etc. So I would say from the beginning there were questions around his legitimacy. You talk about coups. There were 2 in November 2023 and February 2022. These were attempted coups. In both cases, he used them and the circumstances around them, to answer your question, how he sort of rose, and I'm saying consolidated his power, to make the argument that he was under attack. And in relation to the second coup, which is the result of quite a complex engagement around the arrest of the finance minister and the sort of secretary for finance, around an agreement with the IMF about selling shares in a private bank of which the state held. And these guys were then arrested, and the presidential guard was then sent, if you like, to rescue them. But he used that as an opportunity to dissolve the legislature. And so what you have now is a series of party-appointed ministers. I don't want to call it a government of national unity, but it's sort of widely representative of the parties in power. But he has cleverly, I would say, interfered in party politics in a way that has, if you like, reduced the threat to him. The previous case was a sort of armed attack on government buildings, which he made the argument was drug traffickers, and indeed he then rounded up a set of drug traffickers. I think there's some evidence to suggest that that was a de facto attack that he responded to. And I should add here, Andy, that you can imagine Guinea-Bissau, the capital, just a relatively small place, tiny town actually, it's just got rumors swirling around, and it's sometimes really, really hard to know what's going on. You know, people are talking to each other, and you try and draw out a story, and even, you know, general newspaper coverage around Guinea-Bissau and the happenings there are certainly not global, and unless you get the sort of narco states type stories of the mid 2000s. The point I want to make is, in both cases, in one case he could dissolve the legislature. In the first case, he could deploy a regional peacekeeping force, which bolstered and secured his power. So the use of the narrative of drug trafficking has been key. Now, to him and to others, I think it's worth saying that not everybody in the elite is involved in drug trafficking, but trafficking taints the whole system, in that if you are in power, you prevent others who might want to take rents, if you like. There's a kind of clumsy academic way of saying taxing drug trafficking. And you use that to feed your supporters and others. And that's why the drug trafficking economy is closely linked to elections. It's a useful way to buy airtime, T-shirts, food packs when you're campaigning at the time. And it's a kind of tax-free, easily sourced set of finance outside of the in any event, relatively ropey state accounts. So it's become a fixture in Guinea-Bissau's political economy. And there were periods where, and we can discuss those, but where it was felt actually that the threat of drug trafficking had declined. Even I had thought that at a particular point, but it hadn't. It's always been there, and there's indications now that there's actually quite a lot of drugs in Guinea-Bissau now struggling to get out for a variety of reasons, but the intermittent nature of the trafficking through the country and its link to politics remains.
So we're so excited to launch this new piece for the Navy SEAL Foundation. We're titling it I Am. This piece plays out all the aspects that go unseen inside of the life of a team guy, the life of a family member. Everything we do for the foundation, we want it to do justice to the cause and for the community. So we want authenticity, and we want it to make a difference. So we hope you get that from this. We're so excited to launch it.
That makes sense. When did, it seems like cocaine is the main drug associated with transport through Guinea-Bissau. When did it first start making its way towards the shores? When did it really start getting its hooks in?
My view from speaking to people in the criminal economy, politicians, others, people in the military, was that a particularly important historical figure in Guinea-Bissau history, Nino Vieira, was the man who brought it. And I would say there's some disagreement. There's talk that there was some cocaine present in the late 1990s. I think it was a bit later than that. And he met traffickers in Conakry. These were people with dual nationality who had been pulled into the sort of European drug trafficking economy at the bottom end in Hamburg, in Lisbon, but they sort of understood how it worked. And they had contacts. And as you know very well, in the drug trafficking business, contacts are everything. Yeah. And they brokered deals which first began to bring cocaine into Guinea-Bissau in this early 2000 period, and then a little bit later when Vieira became president. Importantly, Guinea-Bissau is the shortest route between Brazil, you know, the main place where you would bring, from a geographic perspective, cocaine, to Guinea-Bissau, to Europe. So this is the shortest geographic point. And as there's the attempts to sort of stem the flow of the main cross-Atlantic cocaine trade, West Africa's always been the sort of side channel, if you like, as it is today, where cocaine is trafficked. And Vera rather cleverly picked up on that. Interestingly, in this process and in my own interviews at the time, I mean, this is kind of classic stuff, right? The military then got involved because they had military power. They could control the airfield, the roads where planes could land, but they got greedy. And they you know, the triangle, the trafficking economy has always been a kind of triangle in Guinea-Bissau. There's let's call them the Latin Americans, very visible, you know, with women and dinner and meeting the president in the hotels in Guinea-Bissau, Bissau. The kind of entrepreneurs I've spoken about, the Bissauians and others who made the links, sort of the criminal entrepreneurs, and then the protectors, a sort of mixture of politics and military guys. And this triangle, people have changed, and the criminal groups involved have changed, but that's basically the mix that has been present. And the military in around the late sort of 2010, you know, it was peaking 2007, 2008. The military tried to move up the chain. To muscle out the foreigners and the entrepreneurs to take more of the profit, because in fact, I mean, and frankly, they were being paid on hardly anything given the amount of money that cocaine was bringing on the streets. I mean, it was like $1 million per, I forget the exact figures now, but it wasn't a lot given the overall value. But they failed, and one of the results was that the traffickers moved along the coast, Liberia, Sierra Leone, into a number of other states, and trafficking slowed in Bissau. Last point, just to mention, because of the US link, is this famous event of the DEA arresting traffickers off the coast of Guinea-Bissau just after the so-called cocaine coup. The coup of 2012, headed by a guy called Antonio Njai, was a coup, basically the military taking over the state to get absolute control over the cocaine trade. And the DEA, in a sort of classic DEA operation, linking it to FARC weapons for drugs arrangement, arrested Bubo Nachuto, the admiral of the Guinea-Bissau Navy. He is the same guy who was arrested in the November incident I've just spoken about outside of government. He was rounded up as part of 30 folks by the current president. Whether or not he's still involved in the cocaine trade, I don't know, but his name is prominent historically in the country for being linked to the cocaine trade. Njai, the guy clearly linked historically to the cocaine trade, the chief of staff of the Guinea-Bissau military has never seen the inside of a prison cell. So there's so much more to say. It's just a kind of amazing story. Drugs put in safes, seized by military officials, planes landing. I mean, it is quite a story. It doesn't mean that it hasn't happened elsewhere, but I just think given the weakness of the state institutions, the degree to which the military have been in control, gives Guinea-Bissau a particular flavor.
Yeah, I was doing some research and reading articles. I think it was $1 million per ton.
Correct, yeah. And nothing really.
I was going to say, I am not a cocaine expert, not my jam. I do understand it is expensive. And I feel like a ton of cocaine, a literal ton, is worth a lot more than $1 million. So they were getting a scrape. But I mean, they were talking about trucks with 1,000 kilos underneath fish. Airplanes, like you said, a fake Red Cross airplane, like, oops, we didn't mean to paint it that. It's like, yeah, I think you did. And for people who are listening to us talk and they may not understand the strategic importance in the cocaine trade, you know, Guinea-Bissau is on the western coast of Africa. You got the Atlantic. How does it seems like it's this entry point, the way you've described it. What's the normal mechanism for this cocaine to arrive in Europe? How does it usually make that jump or follow on transition from Bissau?
3 ways, Andy. First, on flights from Bissau and other West African capitals, And there's been some arrests very recently now. Those aren't direct flights. So, the Bissau-Lisbon flight has often been used. There was an arrest the other day. But there's often indirect flights. You go through one or two other places before you get to Europe. So that's one. And in fact, at the moment, there's an attempt to push up the number of kilograms people are traveling, because there's too much cocaine in Guinea-Bissau and not a way to move it. So the second is trucks across the Sahel, and that's the historic way. You drive either the Mauritania route or the Mali route in documented cases where cocaine has been seized or tracked, and then broken up into parcels and transited to the North African border, taken over the Mediterranean in speedboats or other ways. And thirdly, transshipment. And transshipment is, it's packed in a container in Bissau, or it arrives in a container or other West African ports, and then reshipped off to Europe. I don't have the details. There was a massive seizure of cocaine, over 35 tons in Hamburg a day or two ago. Wow. And I see, at least in the press reporting, of a sort of West African linkage there. So it's clear West Africa is still deeply embedded in this economy, and those are the three ways. Of course, containerization means you can move bigger amounts. The problem now with the cocaine in Guinea-Bissau is you're moving only relatively small packages on the airline routes.
Yeah. Is it safe to say that for a country that probably most people have never heard of, they play a key role in the international drug trade?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I'm not actually sure of the answer, because there's so much cocaine moving. And a couple of tons in Guinea-Bissau is very significant. But in terms of the global cocaine trade, it's not.
Yeah, it's a drop in the bucket.
So they play cocaine, maybe to reformulate it. If there wasn't Guinea-Bissau, I don't think there would be much difference to the overall movement of cocaine globally. Actually, probably no difference. But cocaine itself makes a big difference in Guinea-Bissau, if you understand what I mean. It makes a difference to the stability of the politics. But is it an absolutely key node, in the global cocaine economy? Probably not. Will it continue to be affected by cocaine? Absolutely. Will ordinary people in Guinea-Bissau suffer from that? Without doubt. So it's something that should be tackled. And I think that's partly the problem, and in a way, where the question leads is, it's not enough of a bleeding sore to attract enough attention to stop it entirely, since the DEA's intervention, which indeed did stop things for a particular period of time. So it lacks the attention it deserves, and it lacks the attention that ordinary Bissau Guineans deserve for a stable polity.
This episode of Change Agents is brought to you by MTNTOUGH. I've done a few things in my life, not all of them physical, but there is one thing that I believe. When I have been successful, it has largely been because of the physical capacity and capability I had at the time. The brain is what solves the problems, but it's only as good as the chassis that it is built upon. And that is what I think the value of strength and conditioning, or conditioning in general, is for everybody, regardless of what it is that you do. If you want the muscles, or the muscle, I should say, between your ears to work at peak performance, you need to focus on everything from the neck down as well. The cool thing about MTNTOUGH, or some of the cool things I should say about MTNTOUGH, is you can do it anywhere, right? You can, if you have an internet connection, if you have a device that connects to the internet, you can find the workouts that are suited for you. And it doesn't matter what level of conditioning you're starting, they have a program that works for you. Then there's also a community of people that can help hold you accountable, that you can interface with, ask questions, and join in. I mean, we all know that doing something arduous is better when you're sharing that suffering. Camaraderie, right? It's a combination of pain and laughter. That's my description of it. And some of these workouts hurt. That's okay. The benefit from that is worth it. If you have a community to share it with, it's going to keep you on board that much longer. So Mountain Tough is offering Change Agents listeners an incredible offer. 40% off on the all-new Mountain Tough Plus annual subscription with the code Change Agents. The way that I'm looking at that, it's one word in all uppercase. Go to MTN, that is Mike Tango November Tough, regular spelling.com, and enter the code Change Agents to receive 40% off. The savings of about $100 on your Mountain Tough Plus annual subscription. That's MTNTOUGH.com and enter the code Change Agents to save 40%. That's less than 50 cents per day for the best-in-class physical and mental training available to you. I think that's one of the biggest struggles. I've hosted many episodes about a variety of drug trade and organized crime all throughout the world. And unfortunately, for most people, if they're not directly impacted or affected by it on a daily basis, it's really hard to try to connect the dots on why they should care. Like, well, how does this impact my life? I mean, there's a couple ways to view it. I mean, you could be concerned about the humanity of, all people that we share the planet with and want to make an impact if you can, but it is a tough one. And I agree with you. I mean, if it wasn't Bissau, I mean, for people not familiar with geography, just go look at the size of the western coast of Africa. It's not like they're short on choices for shipping containers or aircraft. I mean, there would be somewhere else.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you agree with the label of narco state with Guinea-Bissau?
I don't actually. It's like I don't want to split hairs about the phrasing, because of course it works in the context of Guinea-Bissau. This is a small state where there's an elite that lives off cocaine, but I just don't think it's analytically accurate for a variety of reasons. I think if Guinea-Bissau is a narco state, then a lot of other states are narco states too. First point. Second point is, the numbers involved in Guinea-Bissau are actually comparatively small, and it's not everybody, even in the political elite. Thirdly, there are in the state, notably within the judicial police, I mean, there's a whole story to be said and written around this, some incredibly courageous guys fighting back. And that's why you get seizures and arrests in the context of Guinea-Bissau, because there's a small number of relatively young guys committed to fighting the trade. They don't get the support that they need, and sometimes the people appointed over them are politically appointed and tainted. And it just seems a disservice to these folks to call Guinea-Bissau a narco state, where down the coast equal volumes of cocaine are being transshipped through wherever, and we don't call Togo or wherever else a narco state. So it just seems a kind of untidy, media-friendly kind of label. I understand why it's used. I absolutely get that. But I think from having worked there and in and out over the years, I'm not sure it's a label that accurately applies.
Yeah. What's life like for your average citizen of Bissau?
People are poor, ordinary people, and they struggle, and the economy doesn't generate jobs. So there's a limited number of things you can do, sort of international aid flows. You work for a global NGO, or if you're educated, you farm. There's a small but interesting tourist economy. So there's beaches, the islands, there's sort of 88 islands off the coast, which of course have been perfect for bringing cocaine by sea. So
tourism.
Yeah, so it's that, and I think key to understanding Guinea-Bissau is again this point of the divide between a kind of more Europeanized elite, if you like, and the mass of ordinary people who don't necessarily, well, who don't benefit from the cocaine economy for sure, and who sustain themselves through subsistence farming and the like. That's more or less it. And it's one of the poorest countries in the world.
Yeah. How did the COVID 2-year pandemic era lockdown, how did that impact the drug trade in that area?
I think the first thing to say about COVID, is that generally on the global initiatives research around the world, so taking Guinea-Bissau out of the equation for the moment, is that drug trafficking never stopped because container and other shipping was going on. And indeed, drug trafficking organizations have survived the kind of Darwinian ringer, if you like. They're pretty, I don't want to overstate their effectiveness, but they are pretty efficient. And COVID, I think, created new markets for them, and it changed markets as well. So it had all of the work we've done showed that COVID and the lockdowns greatly enhanced the criminal economy. It allowed criminal governance to grow in certain parts of the world. It allowed money to be invested in businesses that were failing. What happened in Guinea-Bissau was a kind of economic crisis, and the government declared a state of emergency. And the general view was that the state of emergency provided cover for cocaine trafficking, right? If you shut things down, then there's less things for people to see. And since the mid, the period where I'm talking, where there were sort of Latin Americans in and around, everybody knew they were cocaine traffickers. Guinea-Bissau, the sort of, it went underground for a while. People were still present, but much less visible. And I think COVID provided at least a space finally where there wasn't. We're already saying there's not a lot of attention on Guinea-Bissau. I mean, certainly there's not much attention on Guinea-Bissau in the context of a global pandemic. People were looking at other things. So I think, if anything, COVID probably enhanced the viability of the through trade in Guinea-Bissau. Hard to know, but I would say that the interviews and data would point in that direction.
Yeah. If you were to be able to step in and lead an organization or a panel that would be tasked with trying to figure out a way to uncouple Bissau from the influence of cocaine, where would you start? And do you think it's possible to actually decouple them from that economy now without crumbling the nation even more?
I think a couple of things would need to be done. Firstly, I have always felt that a greater international presence, the UN, the EU, and others in Bissau, provided a degree of watchfulness, if you like, over local developments. So this idea that in a sort of crisis state like this, people withdraw or they disengage, and indeed sanctions were levied against various people, is in fact wrong in this case. That there needs to be, if anything, much greater engagement with a state like Guinea-Bissau. So I think that's the first issue. Historically, the regional peacekeeping forces have been very useful for that as well. So this combination of regional and international focus is key. Secondly, I point again to the judicial police. And Andy, it's almost an unbelievable story to say that in the mix of this economy, as we've described, in what you can describe as a very weak institutional setup, here are these guys collecting information, arresting people. They've adopted different tactics for their own safety, but they've never given up. And I think they need support. And it shows that there are people who want to respond and have done so over the years in extremely interesting ways. The same applies with some selected individuals in the judiciary, not everybody, because there's very good evidence in one prominent case of a cocaine trafficker arrested who was then released, a guy called Sadie Bar. So that's the second area. The third, I think the connection between politics, electioneering, and cocaine has to be broken. Now, I think it's really, really hard to do because, of course, cocaine provides cash, and so it's an unaccounted for easy stream. But I think some thinking about election funding and the like would be really useful. Fourth, extremely difficult to do, and the military's unbelievably sensitive to any attempt to that, is security sector reform. Key problem in Guinea-Bissau is that the military plays a dominant role because of their history, and now things are much more complicated because the presidential guard is being armed up by Imbalo. So there's a sort of mix of security force agencies. Too many guns in a place with weak institutions just kind of spells trouble. There has been attempts at that, including by the EU and others, but it's very, very difficult. So if you're asking what I would do, I think a professional military or no military at all might be a very good way to de-link politics from the gun. And again, I really want to emphasize that people think in standard categories when they think of Guinea-Bissau. It's the army and politicians. In fact, it's a very tight interlinkage between individuals on both sides. And I would say economic growth hard to achieve in a small country like that, given economies of scale and the like. But there are opportunities in most places. Maersk no longer comes to the port for a variety of reasons. That's a big economic hit for a country like Guinea-Bissau, is economic growth. Because the reality is that the elite is not focused on living off or is not focused on generating tax revenues, because there's nothing to generate tax revenues off almost. So you rely on these illicit flows and licit flows. And that's where cocaine is so unbelievably convenient. It's unaccounted for, easy to access kind of sugar money, if you like. And that's why it's so embedded in Guinea-Bissau. I would say that that's the mix. The last is I've already mentioned that they are under threat. There are, again, some very, very courageous civil society actors pointing to the abuses of the state, pointing out cocaine trafficking, contacting judges to try and secure a degree of integrity in the judiciary. These people are the heroes of a particular era in Guinea-Bissau in history, because they have a vision of a different state, one which benefits everybody, and they believe through their actions, free media, radio podcasting is a very up-to-date way to reach a citizenry, is the way to influence political change. Can all of that be achieved quickly? Probably not. And I haven't mentioned whole sets of issues about constitutional change and the like, but that's the kind of package that would be required.
How would you answer the question for somebody, you're in Vienna and the topic of Guinea-Bissau comes up, and they say to you, well, why should I care? How do you answer that? How do you bring it to the forefront of it actually is impactful in their life?
I think we should care because generally there's a level of human solidarity in the first point. So people care historically about development and related issues. And we should care because the cocaine trade affects the lives and livelihoods of 2 million people in this particular place, notwithstanding the fact that, of course, it brings cocaine into Europe with the damage that does, given the burgeoning cocaine economy within the wider European space. And if you care about educating children or making sure people get fed, and making sure that ordinary people in Africa and elsewhere have long-term opportunities, then you should care about the trade and its impact here, because it's exactly the same. It's exactly the same. The institutions break down because of corruption from a particular trade. There is high levels of violence and instability because of a particular trade. And not all of the answers are clearly law enforcement answers, but I think that's why fundamentally we should care, because the promise of Guinea-Bissau on independence, ordinary Bissau Guineans were, I think, very conscious of this, was high. People saw it as a kind of shining light of new possibilities in post-colonial Africa. And frankly, that hasn't been fulfilled. And that reason alone is worth caring about.
I agree. Mark, I know you're getting ready to transition to another meeting here shortly, so I want to be respectful of your time. Maybe if you could close this out with anything that you think we haven't discussed, or maybe references or resources, or just a general direction you could point people towards if they wanted to further educate themselves on what we've been talking about.
Thanks, Andy. On Guinea-Bissau, there's a very interesting and useful literature in English. It's mainly in Portuguese, but there's some important work around the war. There's limited stuff around the development of the Guinea-Bissauian state. We as an institution have tried very hard to cover cocaine trafficking there, Andy, and I, of course, watch our downloads very carefully. And we have a very staunch but limited number of readers on Guinea-Bissau, right? I mean, it's really we can get thousands and thousands of downloads on Haiti, on our reports on the political economy of gangs in Haiti. In Guinea-Bissau, it's in the hundreds.
It's tough.
But yeah, it's not and if you look on our website, we have a lot of I would hope to say the most detailed reporting on the criminal economy and drug trafficking in Guinea-Bissau. And we think that's something we should do. Even if the readership in this particular case is relatively small, it is holding, and you see we name names and the like, it is holding people to account in the longer term for developments in Guinea-Bissau. And I think if you're interested in that arguably would be the best set of resources that you could go to.
Awesome. Well, Mark, like I said, I want to be respectful of your time, give you a little bit of transition to your next meeting. I can't thank you enough for the conversation today. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Andy. Enjoyed it immensely.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode with Mark. If you'd like to learn more about Mark's work, you can go to globalinitiative.net. The link is, of course, in the show notes. And thank you again for listening to Change Agents, an Ironclad original presented by Montana Knife Company. I'll see you guys next Wednesday with an all-new episode.